Welcome back. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana has announced a 2 billion rand conditional grant to fund the rollout of smart prepaid meters, a bailout of 47 billion rand for Transnet, an increase in various categories of social grants, 150 billion rand taken out of the 500 billion rand reserves to reduce the country's borrowing and debt service costs, among others. Now, these are just some of the announcements that were made during the budget speech in Cape Town yesterday. The speech, which set out government spending priorities for the 2024-2025 financial year, was received with mixed views, as some said it managed to cover the important areas, while others say that it missed an important opportunity to make a significant impact in addressing the country's challenges. So there's lots to be discussed. We are joined now by Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana, who joins us virtually from Cape Town this morning after yesterday's speech. Minister, good morning. Thanks for your time as always, and thanks for joining us here on Morning Live.
Well, good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
There's so much to get into, but let me start here, Minister. One of the things you did was to reiterate government's mission to restore social and economic justice and also to address inequality, which is, of course, something that South Africa has to get a handle of. And yet recent statistics show that unemployment continues to grow, meaning that the inequality gap is widening as well. So talk to us about that, given that you said 61.4 billion rand is allocated for employment programs. What exactly will these programs be? How exactly will we monitor their impact? We accept that over the years, particularly because of the electricity challenges, COVID, and a number of things, we've had a number of shocks which have impacted negatively on the performance of the economy. Now, there are a couple of things we need to do. First is to focus on growing the economy in order to create jobs. But in the absence of creating those jobs, you've got to mitigate the impact. How do you do that? The first thing is by doing all of these public employment programs to make sure that people can have some living. And secondly, you cushion that via the social grants. All of those things are not in themselves a permanent feature, but you need to grow the economy and create sustainable jobs. In the meantime, you need to cushion that impact. The second part of your question, which is how do you monitor that? There are two sort of public employment programs. There's one that is monitored directly from the presidency, which is called the public employment stimulus. That one is monitored. We can tell you every day who has been employed where. Where there could be some difficulties is what is called the extended public works program, because it's scattered all over the place. In some cases, municipalities are the implementing agencies. It becomes difficult to monitor the impact in that case. But we're beginning to tighten. Minister Zigalala is developing a program to tighten up the monitoring. So, Minister, I think you touch on the two important aspects that many of the commentators have spoken about. That is, of course, to grow the economy and to reduce unemployment. And many are saying this is actually the crux of our problem in South Africa. So, the economy, how do we get this economy to grow? Because it's been going on now for at least the better part of 2 decades that we don't seem to be getting a handle on this. What needs to be done? What is the problem? You speak about mitigating, but how do we actually grow this economy?
Let me take some few statistics. The World Bank has made an estimate, and that estimate is, were it not for the electricity challenges we face, the economy would be probably grown more by 21% by now in terms of size. That is a major problem. So we've got to deal with the electricity challenge. It's constraining growth. A new phenomenon has been the impact of Transnet. Again, it's a monopoly on the logistics. You'll see on last year massive impact on the mining industry, which also impacted on revenue, not only on jobs,
The third element is crime. Third element is crime, which we need to be focusing on. Again, the World Bank again quoted statistics in the new update on South Africa. They're making the important point that South Africans are spending more money in protecting themselves. So crime has got to be dealt with. So those are the three constraints which I think should be the major focus of the new administration moving forward.
So speaking of, Minister, again, money that's being thrown at Eskom once again. And we look at Eskom and, I heard yesterday one of my colleagues, Bulelani Philip, actually talk to you about fiscal leakages. And surely that has to be a concern. If you think of the money that we spend and whether we are as a nation getting a return on investment, you look at Eskom, you look at the project cost overruns. A case in point, you asked Bulelani for an example and you didn't have time. I'm going to give you one. If you just look at Kusile and Medupi, 2 years ago already, over 300 billion rand in cost overruns. Surely that is not sustainable. And for how long can you keep throwing money at this without getting the necessary return on investment?
Eskom is I must concede, is a major headache. Let me say, highlight a couple of things. For instance, last year, Eskom got 2 injections. First, the regulator gave them an increase of 18.6%. That's revenue for them. Secondly, the government took all of their debt they were supposed to service last year, which is 78 billion rand. Now, one of the key challenges we need to check, we're grappling with, is our problem in Eskom a money problem, or there are other challenges other than money problem? The president decided to put some task team from the law enforcement agents to go into Eskom. A number of people have been arrested, which means there's more than money which is a problem in Eskom. A number of illegal activities are undermining Eskom's performance, and we need to deal with that issue decisively.
So if we look at that, Minister, would you say then the problems there are more structural? And if so, when you look at the conditionalities attached to the bailouts to Eskom, are we actually seeing any significant shifts in the way that Eskom is doing business, in the way that Eskom is being run? Because if not, then we are throwing good money after bad.
If you look at the amount, this new support we've given to Eskom has got conditions. And Eskom is going to meet those conditions. And as a result, if they are not meeting the conditions, there are penalty clauses which are attached to them. And for instance, we've already taken 2 billion rand out of them for not meeting the conditions. So, yeah, we're trying to grapple with this question in a difficult environment.
And then, of course, lots of talk about public-private partnerships meant to alleviate some of these pressures on government, the financial pressures. But again, if we look at the SOE space, are you seeing any good examples at the moment where this is actually paying dividends?
Let me take the electricity space. If you look on the generation side, that sector has already been deregulated substantially. A number of independent power producers are in that space, which are privately owned. Now, that in itself is a major intervention. On the Transnet side, you'll see that, for instance, in the container terminal in Durban, Pier 2, we now have a private operator side by side with Transnet. New advertisements have come out. On the rail side, we'll be bringing in new operators from the 1st of May. So the practical steps that are being done, and I'm sure Those are practical examples I can give you.
What's the latest with SAA and Takatso, Minister?
What I do know is that the SA Act says before you can sell, the SAA is recognized as a state-owned enterprise in terms of an act. So for you to sell SAA, you need to amend that act in Parliament. To my knowledge, that act is before Parliament now to amend that.
So essentially, that deal is at a standstill, is what you're saying?
I would imagine until such time the act is amended.
And it raises then questions, Minister, about, again, going out to look for an equity partner for SAA and all that we've been told as the public regarding the status of that particular deal, only to now get back to the point where we are told there needs to be an, amendment to the act or whatever the case may be legislatively to actually effect this. Why wasn't this thought about before the fact?
Let me, I'm talking with limited knowledge on this matter. This is not part of my line function. I must confess that what I was talking is, I'm referring to this with limited knowledge. I don't have the entire background of this transaction.
Minister, also a lot of criticism, I'm just jumping between things in the interest of time. Another criticism has been, and I saw a lot of the opposition parties critical of the 150 billion rand that will be taken from the contingency reserves. They regard this, many do, as a risky move. They argue that the country has to create revenue by growing the economy rather than dipping into those contingency reserves. So your response to that, and also, is this going to be a once-off, or is this something that Treasury and, of course, yourselves will be looking at tapping into whenever there is a need?
Section 28 of the Reserve Bank Act requires that if there's a loss in that reserve account, the national figures must fit the bill. In 2002, there was a loss, and law in Parliament was passed for the national fiscus to make sure that that loss is sorted. Okay. The same act says if there is a profit which is realized or value realized in that account, it must be transferred subject to details of an agreement between the minister and the governor of the Reserve Bank. So I do not understand what people are talking about. The second set of issues, is it a once-off? We're doing it for the first time, but we realized we looked at international practice and international experts, we even brought in people like the IMF to work with us. What has become clear between ourselves and this Reserve Bank is that we need to create a framework as to how we can do this thing. So, to answer your question, are we going to do it in the future? The answer is yes. The framework suggests that there will be always an evaluation so that in future we should not be starting after. There will be a process of evaluation on a yearly basis. So yes, have we mitigated the risk? If the details of that agreement are such that if you look at what they've done, for instance, what is being transferred is 250 billion rand. However, we're paying the Reserve Bank back another 100 billion rand to mitigate a number of things, including the cost of raising capital. So it's a complex issue, but it's not new. It's international best practice.
Minister, I tell you, appreciate your time this morning, limited though it may have been, and hopefully we can get back to a bigger platform where we can sit around, invite others, and have discussions on some of these very pressing issues, because I think it is important that we speak to broader South Africa about what is going on in this space. So we will send that invitation, Minister. But thank you so much for your time. Finance Minister Enoch.
Thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana discussing the budget speech that he delivered in Parliament in Cape Town yesterday. Of course, much reaction. And as I said there to Minister, perhaps we need to create a platform space to have further and perhaps more in-depth discussions on some of these issues that were raised.